Hey everyone, this is your host, Andrew Holland. Thank you so much for listening to the Andrew Holland podcast each and every week, where we talk about business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. As an entrepreneur who's been through a lot of highs and a lot of lows, I started this podcast to be a source of weekly motivation, inspiration, and support for all of us who are working to achieve something meaningful. And as importantly, so that none of us ever have to feel alone or isolated while we're doing so. Together, we explore the stories of successful people, we get insight and advice from individuals who have accomplished amazing things. We discuss practical and fascinating business models and strategies, and we dive deep into understanding ourselves as human beings. So please, help me grow our group and subscribe to the show on your favorite audio platform. Subscribe to, watch, and thumbs up our episodes on our YouTube channel, the Andrew Holland Podcast. Follow and interact with me on Twitter and Threads. My handle is A Holland Podcast. That's A Holland Podcast. That's probably my favorite part of the whole podcast is the interaction I get with our guests and with you as our listeners. Lastly, if you enjoy the show and you want to support what we're working to accomplish, please share our show with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues at work. This show is nothing without you and your support, and I'm so incredibly thankful for each and every one of you listening, watching, and sharing the podcast every single week. Now it's time to get our motivation, inspiration, and support for this week and jump into today's episode. In today's episode is part 2 of my conversation with Bobby Vossoughi. Again, he's the CEO and founder of Starry Night Consulting and the Starry Foundation. His consulting firm focuses on helping nonprofit organizations take a fundraising event from start to finish, and the Starry Foundation focuses on helping families with autistic kids. Bobby highlights the challenges and rewards of fundraising and building relationships, and he offers advice to those who are seeking to raise capital, whether in the nonprofit world or in the for-profit world. He shares his experiences running the foundation, organizing fundraising events. He emphasizes the importance of delivering unforgettable experiences to donors and participants. And while he specifically talks about it in the foundation industry, it is just as relevant to any industry. And I think it's something that's been lost, but he shows how important it is, delivering unforgettable experiences to your customers. He also discusses the risks and the fears associated starting with the new venture for him, of course, Starry Night Consulting, and he offers advice on overcoming them. We cover a whole range of other business topics that we can all learn from this episode, and you'll walk away from this with a lot more motivation to find that one thing that's near and dear to your heart.
While Andrew Holland is a CPA, a real estate broker, and involved in multiple businesses, including some investment companies, the Andrew Holland podcast is for informational purposes only. All of Andrew's views and those of his guests are solely their opinions and do not reflect the opinions of any of the businesses or companies Andrew or his guests are affiliated with. You should not treat any advice, conversation, business recommendation, investment recommendation, or anything of the like as a specific inducement to make a specific business decision, take a specific action, make a particular investment, or follow a specific business or investment strategy. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the show.
The thing that makes me the most happiest once a year is our gala for Starry Night. We just had our last recent one this October, and it was our most successful one ever. You know,
That's like your main fundraiser for the year, right?
It's our. You know, we're now going to do 4 a year. We do a luncheon in the Bay Area, thanks to my best friend in the world, John Dugan and Original Joe's. They help us really underwrite the cost of that. And then, you know, my background's the Bay Area, so I have a whole network there, and we have an amazing research partner in Cortica Cares and Dr. Elisa Marca and Dr. Kevin Shapiro that are doing amazing work in the brain imaging, so we can give more data to these families that go through our grant program. And this next year, we're actually going to add a golf event in Napa because we have an amazing core network out there and some amazing people that are joining our cause. So we're going to do an event out there in June, and we're going to do our luncheon out there in September. And then Scottsdale, we do a golf tournament in March, the 22nd, and then our signature event is our gala, and that gala was the most successful it's ever been this year. We had 300 attendees. We had it at an amazing venue, the Vault in North Scottsdale, where they house and rent space for high-end cars. So it was a great first-class experience. And one of the big things I do with our foundation that's different than others is we wanted it as a place where you go to have fun and you learn something about our foundation. It's never a Debbie Downer. It's always how many families we're impacting, some stories. And this past year, we had the best story ever. We had a kid, his name's Rome Cady. He was, his first 3 years of his life, he was nonverbal, didn't speak. Now he's at ASU's in the journalism school. And he's someone you should interview, Andrew.
I'd love to.
He's one of my favorite people. He went on stage and helped us create records, because we ended up raising that event this year raised north of $500,000. That was our budget.
Wow.
The first 3 years of our foundation was nowhere near that even number that night.
Yeah.
And that's just because of the generous community that I'm involved with, but also the story we try to share.
The success, the outcomes of what your organization is doing. And, you know, I speak for many, I'm sure. Thank you for doing that, especially for autism. You know, there's everything needs a lot of money. You know, there's St. Jude, there's a lot on cancer. That's right. And very noble causes, and we need that. But I feel like autism is more, and I'm a pretty dense person when it comes to anything medical, so I don't pretend to know anything. But my sister-in-law, Tara, was in the childcare industry for quite some time, and my brother and sister-in-law have 5 kids, and so she knows kids better than anybody in this whole world. And so she's worked with autistic children, and you know, she's tried to explain to me, because I don't really understand, how do you know when it's autism or where they are on the spectrum. Sure. And so I think that's less well-known or funded, or has been historically, and it's only because people like you bring it to light and saying, there's something going on with this child. They're not deliberately trying to do this. They're not, let's figure out what it is and help them how we can. Mm-hmm. And I think now, because of efforts like what you're doing, more and more people are realizing, okay, this is, you can't use force here. You can't, you know, it's not the discipline. They're deliberately doing this. There's something else that we got to figure out somewhere on the autistic spectrum. Let's figure out how we can help them.
Yeah. And you said it the best. I mean, you know, I get constantly told about discipline and this, and these kids go the other way. When you become too militaristic, it doesn't work for them. It hasn't worked in my case. I still haven't figured out the formula with my daughter, unfortunately. But what I can tell you is I'm a huge advocate for my daughter. And the special ed departments at these schools in the Valley and all over the country are imperative. You know, I have the most amount of respect and empathy, and they're my go-tos from the academic side. They're the ones really helping these kids along. And there's so much accommodations they can help you with. And again, this wouldn't have happened if I didn't know, you know, the Tracy Malcolms of the world that's a special ed director at the Arizona Autism Charter School, or the Dr. Gentrys that I got connected with thanks to our gala, you know, and then meeting, you know, Dr. Elisa Marco, and again, very serendipitously. And now, you know, meeting Dr. Kate Bree thanks to a board member. You know, this all happens very organically and through patience. But, you know, what's really what we want to do is, you know, what my biggest dream would be is for my daughter to one day give her story up on that stage at our event and share her journey, because, you know, to be in their skin is really hard. For me, it's very hard as a parent to understand it. But what I do know is through our team and through our collaborations and partnerships, we have opened so many doors for families, and the stories we get are unbelievable. And what, you know, we're trying to do is, even if they're not, for example, in the age of 6 through 12, which is kind of our priority stature, you know, age group for treating these families through medical evaluations through Joseph Gentry, I go way over and beyond to connect them to our partners and get them medical evaluations that you can't get at other places. And there's months and months of wait. I said, no, here, let me call, you know, Doctors Nichols groups. Let me call, you know, Dr. Bonet and all these different doctors in this town. And, everything is also just because of relationships. So that's it.
I wanted, that's been very evident in everything you've talked about, and you're doing it for the Starry Foundation, but life is really about relationships no matter what you're doing.
Right.
And I want to talk to you about that because I think that's one of the biggest things that a lot of, relationships in this day and age, less people have relationships because of this. That, again, people think I always pick on the younger generations, but it's really permeated all of them. I'm very disappointed in how this has changed communications and interaction from face to face. But relationships are important, whether you're in the corporate world, whether you're starting a business, no matter what you're trying to do. And you've clearly mastered or do an incredible job with understanding how important those are for what you're trying to accomplish. So I want to talk a little bit about you're fundraising in a different aspect in terms of, a new startup, for example. But the concept is the same. The principle is the same. You have a purpose and you're going to people and saying, will you trust me? Will you trust our foundation? Will you trust this business that we're trying to do and give me your money? You've just described it. You had a record night at your gala event, and there's no question that with a foundation and I've looked at your board. I mean, you have some heavy hitters. It's a very solid board, and I think, like we talked about, it takes a team of people across the gamut, not only operationally but at a board level for a foundation. But that's the exact same thing in business. It's the exact same thing in business. So for those who have to raise capital, whether it's an investment fund, a real estate fund, a small business, a foundation, you've done it a lot. A lot of people on this stage are uncomfortable looking at someone, shaking their hand or saying, Bobby, will you donate $500 to this? Will you help me out with this? What advice would you give to someone? Let's just take a startup that's trying to raise capital. What are the principles that you think are going to determine whether they're going to be successful or not?
First of all, I think the pitch deck world is one thing that I don't do. It's really, I'm a huge proponent of face-to-face meetings. I'm a huge proponent of getting to know people, building relationships the right way, following up with people the right way, delivering on what we share we're going to do, and also just doing the little things all the time. I pride myself in that, of.
Give us examples. What are those things?
I'll give you an example of, one of our auction trips. You go to these events and you raise, someone spends $10,000 to go to Cabo for a week. Well, we set all the parameters up, we set all the logistics up, but what I pride myself in is, they checked into the hotel, they're there. Hey, Tim, how's Cabo? Did you get in okay? Did the transportation go okay? And he and I went through a text chain. He was just so appreciative of us following through. And I actually had to force him to use this package. I'm like, Tim, you got a great spot. You need to go. And he hadn't even got the airplane tickets for him and his family yet. And he finally did. And he said, oh my God, this experience has been unbelievable. Thank you for taking us from the finish to the start line. I just take pride in giving people what they want, and we've had cases where people have come to us after, we did a trip a couple of years ago. This woman went to the Kentucky Derby and she thought she was getting one package and didn't get that. And we had two sets of people. Let me explain this to you. It's kind of funny.
Yeah.
They went on the same journey. They went to the Derby, same package, spent the same amount of money.
So at your gala, you auctioned off two trips to the Kentucky Derby.
It was actually our golf tournament, but they went and they spent, $6,000-$7,000 for this. It wasn't like, but she thought she was going to be on Millionaires Row. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty low number to think that you're going to do, she wanted everything. The Woodford tasting in 9 yards. And my point was, the one person that didn't have a good experience, we went back to our partner on this and said, hey, we had two of the same trips. Would you mind refunding this? or we're going to do it from the foundation, because we had a partnership with them. And he immediately did it. And the add-on for her was so spectacular. She was so appreciative of that. And, my point is, I would rather make people follow through with what I promised them than to, to have a bad experience, and we have a lot of those. I mean, people think, oh, you just, you're raising this. There's a lot of details that go into it. And to me, that's where I think, separate ourselves. And we try to be so, so intentional with what we do.
Well, I think that's important. The devil is in the details. And that's a cliche that everybody hears. But in reality, if you put it into practice and you actually take that cliche to heart, it's exactly what you're talking about. You don't raise the money and then say, oh, thank goodness we got the money. Hope they have that trip, or maybe they won't ever use it. You make sure that they use it, that they get the experience, and I bet you they remember it and they want to go to that gala every time, simply to support the efforts and the attention to detail that you took. I think that's so glaringly missing in our day and age, that attention. Really what you're talking about is a customer experience, customer focus.
That's it.
And people, you basically highlighted what's almost exclusively talked about in the for-profit world and said, we might be not for profit, but we have a cause and we still have people that are donating to us. They're still our customers. And so why would we drop that attention to detail or this customer experience? And so I think what you just highlighted is a huge opportunity for a lot of foundations to take a look and say, wait a minute, are we doing what Bobby is saying he's doing for his organization, why you've been so successful? And if you're not, here's Bobby. he's got Starry Night Consulting. One of the things I want to talk about based on your experience is when you decided to go out on your own. That's a big risk, a really big risk, especially when you have a family, you have children, you have a daughter who's struggling. There's a lot of expenses that are incurred in trying to get the help that she needs, that thankfully a lot of families don't have to bear. Obviously, there's plenty that do. Number one, how did you feel? Were you terrified? Because I hear all the time, I want to start something. They feel like they're stuck in a job. They're not fulfilling their purpose. They're basically the walking dead. They're getting up every Monday. They're going to the job they can't stand, blah, 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 do it, rinse and repeat. During the weekend, they drink and drink and drink to forget the week. And it's just a miserable existence. But there's a fear to going out on your own and betting on yourself. It's a big risk in their mind. What would you say to someone who is stuck in that trap, that mind trap of fear? And so it's preventing them from really accomplishing their life's purpose from a professional sense or even a personal sense, and doing what they want to do?
I think that's a great question. My answer to that would be, my platform is our foundation and my daughter's journey. And it's opened up so many doors and so many amazing people into my life. It's finding what your platform is. It took me till, I was we were dealing with her struggles to go, gosh, there's something that really matters here. And this is, there's a lot of people that don't let their passion become their purpose. Well, I wasn't one of them. And it's something that we could say words like bet on yourself and lack of fear. No, I have the same fear. I mean, I do these events for a living, and I always, take a step back and go, we're reaching out to X, Y, and Z person, and they could, like you said, they could reject us just as much as they could say yes to us. But again, I don't think like that. I think about, okay, what's the level of service, what's the experiential part of what we do, and what are the things that we can monetize, meaning meaning take off people's plates, make their journey, make their experiences, give them the right resources. That, yeah, I mean, my journey with my daughters cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars in 7, 8 schools and countless teachers. And I don't think about anything like that. I think about, well, how can we help these families that are less fortunate get to the right team and change their journey. But my biggest thing is relationships are everything, and something that I enjoy. I enjoy going to dinners with great people. I enjoy the amazing partnerships that I have in this town. The people, for example, Oliver Baggio at Dominic's. I mean, he's one of the most amazing people I've met in this journey, because he gives back and he hires people that are autistic. I meet people that are constantly trying to help in this space, that people don't know about. There's a lot of silent money that's done. There's amazing organizations in this town like Southwestern Autism Research Center, and my dear friends who helped me in the Bay Area, um, called Cortica. They have 27 sites and they brought one now to Phoenix. We're hoping that more gets done with them. But the biggest thing is these relationships. I mean, we're now getting connected with occupational therapists that are building sensory playgrounds in third world countries, and we're going to be part of that goal of helping these kids with them. That to me is where we differentiate. Is we're trying to make the experience for families, for donors, for everyone be first class, and that's something I pride myself in.
Yeah, and I think it's why you've been so successful. I think I can't highlight or emphasize enough that what you've just described is a lifetime of relationships. You've already told us this didn't happen overnight. And again, so many people, no matter what you're trying to accomplish, but particularly in business and entrepreneurship, people want it right away. And it just doesn't work that way, especially relationships.
Yeah.
If you're trying to raise capital, it's not going to come the first time. It's not going to come the second time. It's going to come with a commitment to consistency, people seeing you out and about, people getting to know you better, because there's lots of people asking for money for lots of things. And what you've highlighted is focusing on the customer experience, building the relationship, getting to know them. You don't meet someone for the first time necessarily and say, oh, will you give me a $50,000 check now? No. I mean, it just doesn't work. Never, you say. No. I want to talk about the characteristics that you've identified through your journey. And you yourself are an entrepreneur. You work with a lot of entrepreneurs. As you said, you've got tons of relationships. Why do you think some people fail and others are successful in whatever they're trying to accomplish?
I think you got to have a lot of drive. I think you got to have a lot of faith. I think you got to be able to take rejection and learn how to, learn. I think the learning part is such a big part of it. I mean, I would tell you, our foundation and the people I get to work with, they end up becoming my mentors, because I learn so much wisdom from people that support us at such a high level. And they're people I go to lunch with, I play golf with. I say there's a gentleman I golf with this summer, and he wrote the biggest check that we've ever received very generously. Never expected anything like it. I knew he's always been supportive of our foundation, but I told him I got a master class on the golf course with him. 4 hours. I just love playing with him because I learned so much. And, he's undertaken me by accident or whatever. And the amount of wisdom that's out there, if you're willing to listen and to learn, and one of the things that I try to be is very coachable. It's something I pride myself in, but I've also learned how to it's okay not to be right. And really, it's okay to take a back seat sometimes. And the thing that I love doing more than anything is the servant leadership, is How can I help others? How can I help other, whether it be organizations, connections to people? I look at the overall value of people in life. And if you're not trying to make me better, and there's so many that are, so I'm fortunate to be able to talk to them regularly, text to them regularly, but what's the depth of your relationships? Because one of the things that I tell, people come to our fundraisers and, can you do this for us? I say, no, I can give you the platform. I can give you the playbook, but what does your network look like? Because you can spend 175,000 putting on a great charity event, but if you're raising 176,000, that's probably not the best use of funds. So I always look at this and say, your network is your net worth. Like what you're building in these rooms, who you're associated with, who you're getting connected to. Every single one of my connections have been through their networks and coming and seeing our events. And that's what I take the most pride in.
So what would you say to someone, let's say they move to a new area, or maybe they've been here for a while, but they don't feel like they have that network that you're describing to accomplish their ultimate purpose? What steps should they take to change that?
Got to put yourself out there. You got to go and it matters whatever industry you're in, what you're trying to do, but go and meet people, and go and, figure out what, go and speak in front of groups you're uncomfortable with, go out there and just, go, I tell people all the time, go and check out a bunch of charity events, that are in my space and learn what really resonates with you. Cause what I do is one event a year for our foundation, our gala. It might not replicate with yours. What replicates with you? What really resonates with you, and and what you're doing? Because, it's kind of what you said earlier. A lot of people want to be entrepreneurs, but don't understand all that takes in all this goes into it. I couldn't have done this myself. I built amazing relationships in the audiovisual space, in the digital graphic space. The auctioneers I work with are the best. Letitia Fry's a mentor of mine. Suba Novell's someone that is a dear friend, and I consider her a mentor of mine. And these are people that have taught me so much. And they're also the ones that are referring me to how I can get better with my own events, because they do hundreds of events a year. I get so much thrill from that. And the thing I like more than anything, I like asking people for money. I love it because I feel like we have a whether it's my foundation or helping teach other nonprofits how to do it, I enjoy it because it's very true, it's very real, and I'm not trying to sell ice to an Eskimo here.
You're not dialing for dollars like you did when you started off. This actually feels real, and it's
very real, very
purpose.
Rewarding, and I see the outcome for our foundation of these other families that we're impacting, and every year we're doing more. So like I realized how important videographers were. So we have a great talented videographer that we use, and he's filming these stories, and we just love sharing these stories and these journeys and making it something that people can look at it saying, we put some money into this organization. We feel very, very confident with the direction he's going with it.
Bobby, you've been very gracious with your time. So just a few more questions for you.
Sure.
When you started, you were a sports management master's, not a business degree, not a CPA, not in finance. When you started your business, how did you know what to do? How did you come up with your business model, your revenue model? Obviously, a large source of your funds are the donations, which takes a lot of work to get. But you've got to run a business. You're running a business.
Right.
It might be a foundation and not for profit, but nonetheless, you have staff, you have team, you have payroll.
Mm-hmm.
How did you even know where to start? What would you say to someone who's like, okay, I've heard Bobby. I just got to meet people, and I've got to try what I want to try.
Sure.
Go. How did you figure it out?
I figured out because of all the events that I was part of, and a big part of when I was at ASU really helping them fund these events and all the logistical elements of it. So I had an idea of costs. I think when I started our foundation, we hired a law firm to help us, with all the logistical elements, how to put it all together. So I had a pretty good idea of that. I also really knew the costs of the money we had already spent with our daughter in terms of getting the right level of service. So I had an idea, but the number one thing I tell you, bring on people that are smarter than you. So I have a great CPA. I have a great, digital marketing person. I have a great auctioneer. I have a great board. I have people that are a lot smarter than me. I have someone that's an expert in QuickBooks and things like this that, that I want. I have a treasurer of our board that looks over these things. So to me, it's very important that you don't do it all either. I don't try to do it. What I do very religiously is I'll build the relationships, sustain the relationships, and really work on that piece very, very every day of my life because I enjoy it. I also really enjoy the making things grow at the right level, getting people to understand how much it costs to put on an event. Because like you said earlier, people think, when I'm going to put on an event, I'm going to raise $1 million. And I literally had a client like this. They have a kid with a debilitating disorder. If they don't get $1 million, honestly, in the next 5-6 years, this kid is not going to make it. And it's a very sad journey. But my point is, I told him it's not possible unless you get a gift from one of your people in your world that really can do it. You can't put on an event and ask someone for, that's going to write a blank check for $1 million. That to me is unrealistic. Yeah. It's like you said, it takes a lifelong of journeys to get to this level. I mean, it was only, in my own experience, it was only 2 years ago that we got our first presenting sponsor level at $25,000. And I've been doing this event for 10 years. So to me, I think there is an art to building relationships and also knowing when to punt and also when it feels right to get people on your team. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, it's excellent advice because I think what a lot of entrepreneurs forget is set goals. And it's okay to have big goals, lofty goals, but also have reasonable goals, set expectations, because expectations are everything. And to your
you said it the best. That they're everything. So what I'm realizing is that people, you can make a spreadsheet look a certain way. You could put numbers that make it, this is how we're going to get to $1 million, but it's through hard work, time, building relationships that more doors open, and the trust level is huge, and going and saying thank you in person, going and, the genuineness to me, I think is something that I work hard on all the time.
It's interesting you say that because with so many of the guests that I have, there's a level of authenticity and genuinity that is so evident or obvious. And for me, when I look at society, so much of it seems fake. The glamour magazines and the Time Person of the Year and all, it's just all a bunch of hoopla to me. A lot of it is just a facade. But when you peel back the onion and you actually get to know someone, you can quickly figure out who's genuine, who's authentic, and who's just putting on a load of garbage. And I think that's really important in the foundation industry, but it's important everywhere. It's important everywhere. Bobby, is there anything that we haven't talked about? Any advice, any words of wisdom, or just anything else you want to share with our listeners before we end?
I just think there's a huge value on connecting good people with good people. I think there's a huge value of serving. I think there's a huge value of, the biggest joy I get to this day is helping families get the right people on their team. My team is very, very big. I mean, I can tell you that I deal with a special ed coordinator, I deal with a counselor, I deal with a psychologist, and this is just at school. Then we're talking about a counselor that my daughter has to see every other week that really hopefully helps. You're talking about speech therapists, occupational therapists, physical therapists sometimes, because there's a lot of challenges that go with this. But the biggest thing I've learned and would tell you is the amount of families I've connected with that go through the same journey I'm going through are my dearest friends. They understand what I've gone through. I love talking to them, love venting to them. Not in a negative way, but just get their ideas.
Everybody needs to vent. And anybody that says they don't, they either hold it in and they blow up like a bomb,
right.
or there's no good outcome if you don't have people that you can vent to.
Yeah. But I'll tell you, we have an amazing community in Arizona. One of the best. And I'll tell you why. They're very generous. B, a couple weeks ago, I was at an event I was invited to by Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community. It was at the Talking Stick baseball where they do spring training for the Rockies and Diamondbacks. You know what I got the biggest high? They have created a whole sensory space for kids. It's amazing. And I took a picture of it on my phone, and you're seeing this all over the place.
What facility is this at?
This is a Talking Stick at the baseball
The hotel or the baseball fields. Okay.
They got a space because they've got Christmas lights going on where you can ice skate, all this stuff.
Yep.
But what I was so proud of is that was my vision a decade ago, to see more thoughtfulness here. Right now the numbers are staggering. 1 in 21 kids has sensory issues. 1 in 42 kids in Arizona have autism at some level. That's a big number. And these numbers are getting more and more. And then now in the tech space, I read something yesterday that artificial intelligence is now able to accurately diagnose autism at a 98%. 98%.
Are you serious?
So now the delta is so much more finite, So, I just appreciate your willingness to let me share this platform and to help serve other kids, nonprofits. But to me, it's more about just more awareness around this and to really appreciate how much is being done in this community.
Yeah,
around it.
Bobby, the pleasure has been all ours.
Thank you
so much.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that concludes my conversation with Bobby, and what a great conversation it was. You can hear the passion and the emotion in Bobby's voice for what he's doing and how near and dear it is to his heart. And part of the reason he's been so successful, the Starry Foundation just having a record-breaking gala this past October, it's because he's doing something that he's so passionate about. So I want to ask you, are you waking up every single day and doing what you are extremely passionate about? If you're not, that's okay. Have you identified what that is? If you have, what steps are you taking to get there? Bobby is a perfect example of he had to take a lot of different journeys and paths to ultimately get to running his own business, Starry Night Consulting, and starting his foundation, Starry Foundation. It didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of patience, and it took a lot of grit and going through different jobs that maybe weren't his favorite. But throughout that whole process, he was building relationships, cultivating relationships. And that's ultimately what helped him fulfill his purpose and starting Starry Night Consulting and the Starry Foundation. So take a step back and think about for yourself. If you're not there yet, what steps, what actions can you take to get there? But remember that throughout the whole journey, be sure you're putting yourself in a position to build relationships, to cultivate relationships, because whether we're talking professionally and more importantly, personally, so much of life is about relationships. And Bobby is a perfect example of that. That's all the time that we have for this week's episode of the Andrew Holland Podcast. Thank you so much for listening every single week. Please reach out to me on Twitter. Holland Podcast is my handle. I really enjoy interacting with you as the listener through Twitter. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, the Andrew Holland Podcast, so that you get the updates when we post the video version every week. Or if you prefer to listen, please subscribe to the channel, the Andrew Holland Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your other podcasts. Thank you so much for joining us, Enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll talk again next Wednesday. Thank you for listening to the Andrew Holland Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theandrewhollandpodcast.com, for additional content on business, entrepreneurship, and everything in between. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Andrew Holland Podcast, to get notifications when new podcasts have been released. And lastly, follow us on Twitter, A Holland Podcast. That's A Holland Podcast, for all the conversations we're having outside the podcast. Thanks again so much for joining us this week. Have a great day, and we'll talk again next week.